Welcome to Guru Fantasy World. This is your host, Dave Gattiri. Today's episode, we're going to talk about one of, if not the most important topics in Dynasty Fantasy Football. That is how to dig yourself out of a hole. When I say dig yourself out of a hole, I'm referring to teams that didn't finish near the top of their league, lack youth, and lack future rookie picks. How do you save a team that's dying like that? How do you dig yourself out of that hole? And number one, I think you probably know the first step already. It's trade those veterans for younger players plus rookie picks, or just rookie picks. It doesn't take an expert to tell you that's going to help you rebuild a team, dig yourself out of a hole. But how do you take that step further, right? What do you do with those rookie picks once you have them to create even more value for a team, depending on how big of the hole it is that you need to dig yourself out of? And what you can do, essentially, you have two options with a rookie pick. And what you can do, number one, is you can draft a player with it. And you can try and draft the best players better than everyone else. And that will improve your team. That's one way to dig yourself out of a hole. But as you know, we're all trying to do that. Everyone in your league is trying to draft the best players better than everyone else. And even if you have some sort of advanced analytical scouting process, it's still going to be difficult to dig yourself out of a hole just by picking players better than everyone else. So what is your second option? You can trade that pick and you can compound value. And what you're trying to do is take one single first round pick and turn it into a first, 2 seconds, a third, and some throw-in players. And you can do this fairly easily over a 3-year span. And obviously any rebuild, you don't want it to take more than 2 years into the third year at the very, very most. So how are you going to do this, right? When you're on the clock in a first round of a rookie draft, almost always you should be able to find someone who will trade you a first in the following year and a second for your first this year, because you have to pay a premium to come from next year's draft into this year's draft, and you can almost always find someone who's willing to pay that premium. So I'm going to refer to it essentially as this year, next year, and the following year, right? The 3-year span here. In the first year, if you trade your first round pick for a first and second next year, you've already compounded value and created a free second round pick. You're still left with the first that you started with, and now you also have a second round pick. That's compounded value right there. That's essentially what it means. And then you can turn around and do it again if you want. You can trade that first next year for a first and second the following year. And now you're left with 2 extra second round picks in addition to the first that you started with. That is compounded value. And you can do that over 2 consecutive drafts. And you can also take that first free second you got from the first trade, and you can compound that into a second and a third. So it's this snowball effect of trading back out of this year's draft into next year's draft and getting a plus on top. That is how you're going to compound value, and it's risk-free. You're doing this without ever selecting a player. You didn't even ever have to make a decision on any player. You're just trading out of this year's into next year's and getting a plus on top. And like I said, you can do this. You can also compound the free picks you get in that. If you have an early first round pick, say you have the 101 this year, you can trade the 101 for the 103 in a second round pick. There you go. You already have one free second right there. Then you trade from the 103 to the 106 and pick up another second. And then you can take that 106 and trade out of this year's draft into next year's and pick up an extra plus on top, whatever it is. This is obviously going to vary because like the 2023 class is heavily valued. It might not be as big of a plus. And then next year in 2023, when you're trying to trade out of 2023 into 2024, you'll be able to get a much bigger plus because the picks will be valued so much higher. But you're always looking to get a plus, and that's what the compounded value is. And you can add to it by getting throw-in players, right? Say you have a first this year. You trade it for a first and second next year and a throw-in like Albert O. or a Kane Nwangwu, one of these guys who has talent, who you might like, but it's like buried in a depth chart. Someone's willing to throw them in for free. Then those players can turn into valuable pieces as well. So essentially, what you're doing, you're kicking the can down the line. You're not picking a lot of your picks. That's what's gonna help you dig yourself out of a hole without a whole lot of risk, because you do take a risk every time you pick a player. Every time you select one, you're taking a risk that it might turn to crud pretty quickly. So you're eliminating risk by compounding value. You're creating free assets essentially out of thin air. And even if the first that you trade, let's say you traded the first that turned into Justin Jefferson for a first and second the next year, you lost out on some additional value. That's true. But you still gained value by trading that first for a first and second the next year. And not as much value as you could have gotten had you picked the right player and then sold him. But don't confuse that as not getting value. You're still getting value, just not as much. So it's a guaranteed value essentially. And when you're rebuilding a team and say you don't have a lot of leeway to play with, you can't afford to take risks, you need to lean on risk-free ways to create value. And that's what compounding value can do for your team. That's how you're going to improve your team without taking risk. And it applies to a lot of different, even if you're a good team, you need to consider what it means to compound value and how you can use it to your advantage, how you can create these assets out of thin air, essentially, just by using rookie picks, using the hype, and trading out of 1 year into the next year, getting a significant plus on top. It's very simple if you follow the process. You stay patient, and you continue to, especially if you stack it and do it in consecutive years, you can end up, like I said, with 2 free seconds and a free third and some thrown players just from one single first round pick. So yeah, that's really it for today. I hope that made sense to you guys. Hope I explained it well. If you liked it, hit the like and follow. We'll be having some guests on soon. We're gonna have some real top-notch guests. I won't spoil the list at all, but we're gonna have some good ones. So keep an eye out and have a good one. Go make some trades.